will tend to keep things from somebody that has a lot of anxiety because they take it and they make it all about them and their worries, and they use that to become very self-centered. They don't realize that anxiety and low self-worth and all that are very egoic. They don't particularly like to hear that, but I try to say it gently. You have to be careful that we're not making every situation about you and your fears.
Hello and welcome. Kate Champion here, and that is the voice of Denise Schonwald. Today on Living Big Mindfully, I am excited to be sharing this insightful conversation with you. Denise is an author, a nationally licensed mental health counselor, and she has worked as a registered nurse for 30 years, many of those years in critical care. Denise is passionate about understanding energy, the body-mind connection, and making a positive impact on people's lives. Denise starts out by sharing a little bit about her story and how she got to where she is today. And then we talk about the powerful connection between the mind and the body, the way stress shows up and the damage it can do. And we talk about the energy centers, also known as chakras, a topic I am fascinated with. Denise says we can heal our bodies by mastering our minds. That's right, you heard it. How? Well, she talks about the importance of ditching the guilt, setting boundaries, and communicating clearly. And be ready, because Denise peppers lots of actionable tips and strategies throughout this conversation. Plus, if you do want to learn more, Denise is offering listeners a chance to grab one of her books. No surprise, Denise wraps things up with some wise sage advice. You know, everything we do here, from the podcast to the books to the communities, is all about supporting and inspiring you to live a longer, stronger, more intentional life. You know, I'm a huge advocate for seeing, healing, and working with the whole person. And this conversation goes a long way to support people with our physical, mental, spiritual, and energetic health, which I think is such an important topic. Remember to download your copy from Panic to Peace, your free guide, a must if your loved one is struggling with stress or anxiety. And of course, you can book a call with me too. Everything can be found by visiting katechampionauthor.com. Whether you're listening for the first time or a regular, please know I appreciate you, I support you, and I thank you so much for listening today. Okay, my friends, here's Denise. Hello, Denise. It's so nice to connect with you today. How are you?
Doing well, thank you.
Good. I really appreciate you coming on the show. We were chatting a little bit in the back there about how we connected. I heard you on another podcast and was just so intrigued, right, by this combination of kind of mental health, physical health, and then adding the spiritual health component in. So I'm excited to dive in today.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate you having me here.
Yeah, of course. So I do want to hear a little bit about you and your background and your story. You know, how did you get to what you're doing today? So yeah, maybe we could start there.
Well, I think my background's a little different than most. I was a critical care nurse for many years, and I loved the profession. I loved nursing. I loved working at the hospital, but like parenthood, it's for the young. It's a lot of long shifts. It's a lot of very heavy patients, literally, physically. It's very mentally stressful. And as I got older, I really wanted to do something a little bit less strenuous on my body, and also to have a little bit more freedom to do things that I had wanted to do. And so I decided to go back to school to become a therapist. And what I realized after going sort of bridging over to psychology is how much our mental health affects our physical health. Mm-hmm. And so I'm starting to bridge all the mental health and spiritual components to ultimate healthy living.
I love that. So tell me if you can, what kind of got you into nursing in the first place? Tell me a little bit about that part of your life.
One thing I love about the body is it's extremely sophisticated. And when it does whatever it does, or we have some sort of, as far as medicine, pain or an ailment, it's actually telling some sort of a history. It's likely something that has happened long time before. Now it's starting to sort of show itself in some form or another. And although people would come into the ICU very, very ill, it was never really a shock why they were there if you could understand how to take a good history and to understand the body. And I love that about medicine. I mean, I love that about the body. Psychologically, I don't think we're quite as good as recognizing little ways that the body cues us that the nervous system is really not doing well.
Yes, and that is actually kind of what we're going to be diving into today. So tell me a little bit about this. I read a kind of a quote on your Instagram post, and it said, "Your mind has the power to shape your life," right? And so your mind also, I believe, has the power to kind of heal your body. So tell us a little bit more about that in your expertise in your clinical practice. How do you see those two things, like the mind, the body mind, coming together?
The interesting thing is when we perceive situations or we attach emotions to thought, if these emotions are fear-based, like anxiety or depression, shame, grief is actually a very heavy emotion, the nervous system gets out of balance. And so when that happens, the mind becomes very, very active and the body's being cued by the mind. So the body is chemically sort of preparing and responding to what the mind tells it to do or is cueing it. After a while, if the mind is chronically very active and our thoughts and situations are very fear-based, after a while, the body needs ease. And the mind will come in and maybe introduce something that maybe is not our best way of finding ease. And these are where addictions start to creep in.
Mm.
Many times we don't connect that. I don't know why I overeat, or I don't know why I constantly need to shop or whatever we're doing. We just don't connect the fact that the body is trying to let us know that it's not in balance.
Yeah. Yeah. So the word I've learned way, way back and kind of in grad school was this word dis-ease, right? Right. When you kind of separate that word out. So that's really what you're talking about too, right? It's this kind of body feeling like it's uneasy and it's kind of trying to self-regulate by some of these external factors. And then that's where the kind of, if that's not taken care of, is that where the disease component kind of comes in?
Yes. So depending upon what we're struggling with emotionally or mentally will be exactly where it manifests in the body. So when I see someone for the first time, I like to understand what are their physical problems? What are some chronic things that they are struggling with? And when I understand that, I already know emotionally what they're dealing with, what that has contributed to that.
So from your clinical practice, again, I see a lot of people too. And what are the top three things that you see kind of physical complaints that people come in with that might be tied to mental health or this dysregulation? What are the top three areas, would you say?
As far as physically, we're seeing anxiety affects a lot of like nausea and troubles with bowel and so forth. Most people will quickly go to a diet. Like they'll all of a sudden eliminate gluten, or they're no longer having dairy and so forth, not realizing that emotionally they're struggling with things that the body is starting to sort of tell or express the story of what's going on mentally. But see a lot of physical problems, a lot of autoimmune.
Yeah.
See a lot of autoimmune problems. With the young teenagers, a lot of heart problems, a lot of heart palpitations and so forth. So they'll go to the doctor and get on some sort of heart medication to sort of control the heart rate, not realizing that their mental, the way that they're dealing with anxiety and so forth is actually sort of contributing to their heart problems and so forth.
That's fascinating. And that kind of tracks with me. I see a lot of gut issues, a lot of autoimmune stuff, and then kind of this general pain around kind of headaches, joint pain, that type of thing, right? Just not feeling well, kind of fatigued a lot, brain
Right.
fog, that type of thing.
Procrastination, exhaustion, and it just, especially when they're young, they really shouldn't have these problems. And really, even as we get older, we shouldn't struggle with all of these chronic exhaustion, chronically feeling stress, chronically having palpitations. This is a sign or a signal, the body's trying to cue it that something needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I mean, I love your frame there that it's not as you age. I'm 60, right? Just turned 60. As you age, it's not a given, right? That you're going to have heart problems, or you're going to have cancer, or you're going to have this or that. I mean, in society, it tells us, you're getting older. This is breaking down. That's happening, but maybe that's not really a given, right? It's not. We don't have to go through that, I'm guessing.
Correct. Some things as we age will start to wear out. The heart will start to weaken as we get older and so forth. But a lot of things, and I realized this when I worked in the ICU, most people that were patients in the ICU had put themselves there by not taking care of themselves and so forth. There were every once in a while some that had, 80, 85, 90 that had fallen or had a heart attack. Okay, that's sort of expected or certainly understood. But most people there had neglected something with their mental health or their physical health that had, unfortunately, they have become a patient now in critical care.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of so sad, right? It's just so sad, so sad. So tell me, so you got the clinical practice, you got the ICU background. How did the energy work? Now, the kind of work around chakras, how did that come in? And I'd love to hear more about that.
Totally accidentally. When I was learning how to work with patients in the clinical setting as far as psychology, most of the practitioners that I was working with worked off of a tablet. So they would talk to the patient and they would type into a tablet. And I just didn't feel comfortable doing that. One, because I'm not really computer savvy as much as I would like to be. And I really felt like I wanted to listen and understand. And so I decided to just, after the first time, I would just remember their story. And it's interesting when you work with people that you remember enough about them, what they struggle with, and maybe how many children they have. And I was noticing an amazing correlation between mental health and physical health. So people that were struggling with the same sort of mental struggles were showing the same physical ailments. And at the time, I was working with a psychiatrist, and I went to him and I said, this is an amazing correlation I'm noticing. And he said, well, you really need to understand the chakras. And I had no idea what he was talking about. I didn't know how to spell it. And I said, oh, okay, I'll, go back and look at that. So I did the best I could to spell it and started to read about it. And I thought, this is it. This is exactly what I'm understanding. So probably for the past 8 or 9 years, I've really been studying energy. Why do people go for acupuncture? Why do people do yoga? Why is their faith? Why is that so important in their well-being? And started to sort of connect it all and realized how much our physical health really depends on our emotional and mental health.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you say energy, I have my ideas of energy. Talk about that. Put some language to that, put some concepts to energy, because I think it can be such a kind of like a kind of out there term. So let's put some language on that for listeners so they can kind of track with us as we chat through this a little bit.
As far as psychology is concerned, obviously everything is energy, but as far as what I'm looking for is emotional energy. When we experience a situation or we put a thought, an emotion to a thought, that emotion actually has energy. They measure that in what they call a hertz. It's measured in vibration. As you know, grief is quite a heavy energy to hold. So most people might say, not really familiar with energy, but they're definitely familiar with how heavy or how light an emotion is. For example, when you're grateful and you're joyous, that's a wonderfully light and high vibrational energy, and we feel that. We might not know exactly what hertz that is. It doesn't really matter, but we sense that. We also sense energy in other people. You might be around somebody and say, I don't know, that it seems like something's upsetting her, or she seems very stressed. You don't know that. The mind doesn't know that, but the body senses it. The body feels and is very perceptive to the energy.
Yeah.
Trust is a good one. We feel that one in the stomach. We might not know because somebody's being nice to us that we don't trust them, but there's something about that energy that they're around us that makes us feel uncomfortable.
Yes. Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. So would it be okay if we kind of dive into chakras a little bit? So we've been talking about this healing energy. So what are the chakras? What do they mean, and how can we begin to use them in, this kind of healing process? How can they be part of our kind of healing team, if you like, mental health, physical health, and how can we begin to dial in to the chakras?
If you think about the word chakra, it means wheel or disc. So imagine there are 7 sort of main energies or chakras, and I imagine them to be like a little gate, and they open and close depending upon situations. For example, when we're really happy to see someone and we're just elated and we say, oh my goodness, my heart is so full. And what we're feeling is that high vibrational energy. The heart chakra is open, it's flowing. We feel very light, we feel very happy. Consequently, when something tragic happens to us, somebody passes away or we lose a job, we also feel the heaviness of that. Because what happens is, depending upon what emotion it is, that energy blocks. And I might say, oh, my heart is so heavy, or my heart is just broken because the energy now is blocked and I feel that heaviness. Depending upon the emotion is where we will feel it in the body.
So run through for listeners that aren't familiar, kind of run through the chakras, kind of where are they, where do they start, where do they finish, and kind of what do they do? What do they, I'm not going to say control, but what do they influence?
Oh, okay. That's a wonderful word. So the main one is right about the base of the spine. That's our root chakra. So think about your tailbone. It's about right there. And what that energy does in childhood, if we've grown up in a fairly well-balanced home, that energy learns to flow beautifully. That's our foundation. So we learn at home cultural values, we learn rules, we learn that we're the best thing ever because our parents love us and support us. And ideally, that would establish a wonderful, well-rounded grounding chakra. Some of us have not had that experience. We've grown up with maybe dad's an alcoholic, maybe there's a lot of tension in the house, maybe there's a lot of abuse or neglect. And what happens with children is that energy does not develop well or properly. And so the foundation is really never formed appropriately. And this is really actually where autoimmune diseases can come in later on.
Interesting.
So hip problems, back problems, depression sits in the root chakra, rectal problems. And if you think about where it is and you think about that energy, that's usually responsible for that. So that's an energy that's so important because, again, that's our foundation to our livelihood. The second one is right around over our bladder, or if we're women, or our ovaries and our menstrual, where we menstruate and so forth. So that one is responsible for relationships. Money is there. Power and control are there. Guilt is there. Guilt is really hard on the bowels and a lot of people. Here's a great example. Young couples that want to get pregnant and they can't get pregnant and they feel very guilty and they're trying to control and they're doing this and that. They'll go and finally adopt and they get the new baby home and everything is great. Next thing you know, they're pregnant.
Yeah.
that energy now has opened up because it's no longer, sort of closed up because they're trying desperately to conceive. And the next thing you know, once they sort of let go of that, or they stop trying, and then the next thing you know, they're pregnant.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So that's sort of a quick sort of example of the second chakra. The
Mm.
third one is probably the one that impacts most of us. It's right around the solar plexus. So that's our stomach. The emotions that sort of get filtered through that are trust, fear. Fear is a big one, as we know with anxiety.
Yeah.
Sensitivity to criticism, and the relationship we have with ourselves.
Mm.
Many people, I tell clients all the time, I would never hire them to take care of them.
Mm-hmm.
Do a very good job. And so when we don't have a really good relationship with ourselves and we struggle with fear and we struggle with criticism and self-esteem, we will either do one of three things, is what I usually see: overeat, not eat, or drink a lot of alcohol. Those are usually how the body tries to balance, to try to deal with, because if you feel like the body's not being taken care of itself, you can imagine how stressful that is.
Mm-hmm.
It's stomach ulcers,
Mm-hmm.
stomach intolerances, indigestion. I mean, there's a lot of stomach stuff that come from that.
Yeah.
The heart chakra, which is wonderful for love, forgiveness, gratefulness. I mean, there's a lot of beautiful energies there. There's also bitterness, resentment, anger, anxiety. So there's a lot of things that can block that energy. And so when it blocks, we have heart problems, lung problems. So these are, and for women, breasts. Anxiety is really hard on women, and we have breast cancer from that.
Okay.
I have never had a client with breast cancer, and I asked them to describe their life before they were diagnosed. A lot of anxiety, maybe a lot of bitterness and resentment because of whatever. There are emotions that have contributed to that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we can't just say it's because it runs in my family. I was exposed to something. There's a lot of things that have contributed, particularly the nervous system.
Yeah.
The next one is right under the throat here. It's a throat chakra. If you ever see someone who's getting up to speak publicly, and they'll get up and a lot of times they go, excuse me, they get a little water or whatever. That energy is blocking because they're a little nervous and they want to be heard. They're going to be speaking, and there's a little bit of nerves behind that. Either they'll get a little water, and as they start to go, it'll start to flow, or it's not going to flow, and it becomes a little bit of I wouldn't say a disaster, but it certainly becomes very cumbersome and so forth.
Yeah.
As far as our everyday life, when we're not heard, when we can't use our voice, when maybe we do use our voice and it's dismissed, maybe we're in an abusive relationship, that energy behind the throat blocks, and we have thyroid problems, throat problems, teeth problems, gum problems. Again, we got to go under where the energy is, and we can almost guess jaw problems, where that's what's going to sort of manifest, because that energy becomes affected and those organs are obviously going to pay the price.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So then we have our third eye. That's right between our eyebrows.
Kind of here. Yeah.
That's our inner knowing, our intuition, seeing the big picture. It can be very hard to allow that to develop. Our intelligence is also there, when a lot of times the mind comes in and sort of overpowers what we are. I call it our inner knowing.
Yeah.
When I was a nurse, I would look obviously at the chart, and I would look at vital signs and so forth. And sometimes they look just fine, but I looked at the patient and the patient didn't look that great.
Yeah.
And I would say something like, something is just not right with him. I don't like the color of his skin, or I don't like, there's something. And that was my inner knowing.
Yes.
I had no idea what it was. And on paper, they looked just fine. but there was something about the whole energy of them that just wasn't quite making sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So in psychology, I also go with the same thought when I hear what they're saying, but it doesn't quite add up to me. For what reason, I have no idea.
Yeah, yeah, I can really connect. I really can connect with that as a therapist too. There is this like kind of sixth sense, right? I mean, you're just
Mhm. Yeah.
somehow picking up things and then just, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to put language on that, right? Because it is just such a sense, right? It's kind of a sense. Yeah, yeah.
Yes. In nursing, we would say the diagnosis is something ain't right. And it was like, and nobody would know what it's like. I know, but it's like nobody knew what it was, but we just got going. Yeah, something ain't right.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
yeah. It's so cool to hear that, right? It's so cool to hear that can nurses kind of have that ability too, right? To really kind of
Mhm.
pick up on some of these vibrations. Yeah, that's really cool.
You also can see in medicine when they don't seem to have that intuitive connection. They're
Mm,
very interested in the chart and what the numbers are, but they're not exactly looking at the whole picture and this critical thinking. And we can thank the third eye for that, to sort of understand there's more to it than what we see. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, we're more than just a bunch of systems, right? That need to be kind of looked at through a medical lens. We're so much more, right? So
Yeah.
much more complex. Yeah, yeah.
Yes. And so much more than sometimes we say to each other. You know,
Oh,
what we say, there's a lot of meaning behind that.
hmm.
And then the last chakra, the seventh, is sort of above the head. And this is our connection to the divine or to
Mm,
the universe, to God, whatever people deem, the divine or the universe. And if we can open that energy up, it's hard because the mind fights that. The mind likes to be in control and the mind is very fear based. But actually, the universe has its own sort of language and its own order of events. And a lot of times we resist that. We fear, we fear life's events.
yeah. So it's unconsciously, right? I mean, that's kind of an unconscious resisting, I would imagine. I mean, what are your thoughts about that? That kind of,
Well, it
yeah.
depends. Like, for example, I could say something like, "Oh, I've been having, I don't know, problems with my shoulder. I certainly hope that I don't need a shoulder replacement because then I'm going to be out of work and so forth." And that's not exactly what it means. And so intuitively, yes, I should go the prudent sort of choices to get it looked at, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I've got something terribly wrong. Sometimes things happen in our life that the universe is trying to get our awareness. That's why it's uncomfortable or it's suffering. And for whatever reason, it needs to happen. And I can fight it and I can predict and project and so forth, but it's likely going to happen anyway. So I'm going to be out for 6 weeks with my shoulder. There's not going to be a whole lot I can do about it. I can accept it and realize that there's some reason for that to happen, or I can fight it and stress about it and worry. And unfortunately, when we have these low vibrational energies, they pull from any other people. They're very pulling energies, and people feel bad for us, but after a while, we're exhausting. Anxiety is a very exhausting energy.
Oh, so. I
Mhm.
have some family members that have anxiety. It's like, whew, you
Yeah.
just feel it kind of in waves at times. It just feels like a lot. Yeah.
Yes, it's
It's a
very
lot.
pulling. And so when they're around, you get caught up in that energy when we were talking about that before. And all we know is it's exhausting. In fact, we'll tend to keep things from somebody that has a lot of anxiety because they take it and they make it all about them and their worries, and they use that to become very self-centered. They don't realize that anxiety and low self-worth and all that are very egoic. We
Mm.
toward the self. They don't particularly like to hear that, but I try to say it gently. You have to be careful that we're not making every situation about you and your fears.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I love that. That is so wise and so true. I
Mhm.
hadn't really put that together, maybe that it's really is a kind of egocentric
Mhm.
type of blend, right? That, but it does all come back to them, doesn't it? You know, my worry, my fears, my this, my that.
Yes.
Mm,
Physically, when we're ill or we have the flu, the only thing that we can think about is ourselves. Oh my goodness, now I have a
mm,
fever. Oh my goodness, now I have a headache. Now I have this. Psychologically, when we're not well, that's also what we think about. My worry, my guilt, my stress, my. Again, it's a very pulling energy because we're not in a good place.
yeah, yeah, and spiraling, right? And we know that energy attracts energy, right? So if you're in that energy, you're just going to get more of it, I would imagine, right? It's just
Yes.
going to multiply. Mm,
Yes. And what
yeah.
happens energetically is you will attach to people who will attach to you at that vibrational frequency.
Oh, wow.
For example, a drama person or a person who likes gossip. In the office, they're going to find somebody who will gossip with them because that energy, a high vibrational person is not going to stay there too long. They're going to say, "Oh, I didn't know that about so and so. I'm sorry to hear that." And so in relationships, when we're vibrating at a very low energetic sort of threshold, we have to be careful. We'll attract somebody who will either manipulate us or attach to us at that level. Usually somebody who's going to manipulate and control. They need somebody who sort of at a fear, an anxious person is unfortunately fair game for somebody who's very controlling, manipulative. So they
Mm.
get themselves into some tough situations.
Yeah, I can imagine that could be some really scary situations, right? Especially in like kind of intimate relationships and things like that. Yeah, yeah.
Because
That's fascinating.
anxiety, we have to be careful because when we struggle with anxiety, we start to lose our measure at what's sort of concerning and what's not. And so they call that a paradox. It'll actually flip things that they're so concerned about everything, but then something comes to them that they should be concerned about, and they're not. They totally miss it.
Okay, because they built this tolerance, I'm guessing, because
That's
everything is so fearful, and then they're missing the real fear, right? They're missing what
correct.
should really be kind of saying no, thank you.
Yes, well put.
Wow.
And particularly people who would like to sort of take advantage, they seize that opportunity, that they
Yeah.
built up that tolerance and they're going to miss how I call them like sort of spiders. They come in and weave a web around them, and before they realize it, they're stuck in it.
Wow. I have to tell you that my head is exploding right now because that describes so many of the people that I see, right? They're in these relationships. They're like 2 or 3 years in and they don't really understand what's happened. And now they're really stuck and it's not a good situation. And generally, it's women. I mean, I don't want to put
You're
gender.
correct.
The women seem to be a little more vulnerable and the
Mhm.
males seem to be a little more, I don't know, predatory in some ways. But I see that pattern
Yes.
so much, so
Mhm.
much.
Yes. And
Mm.
it's a very, they're masterful, and most of the women really want to be loved and they want to be filled, and they know how to give enough of that to keep them sort of under the spell, if you will.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, wow, that's fascinating.
Mhm.
So we've just gone through the chakras, right, from the
Mhm.
root kind of to the crown. So what about I would you talked in one of the podcasts I listened to about this kind of inner circle, right? Kind of creating this inner circle and then kind of having some boundaries around that. So what is the importance of having an inner circle? And then how do we begin to set some boundaries, right? If we're finding ourselves in some of these kind of little um, questionable situations.
Yes. And so if I can, I'll bridge it between the energetic connection. So in the solar plexus. So again, that's the relationship we have with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
What that is, and what I'm trying to get people to understand with the circle is, what is it about you that you bring to the table? What are your values that you really love about yourself? And it doesn't have to be, I make $1 million. It could be, I'm an honest person. I'm
Mm-hmm.
trustworthy. Whatever that looks like. it's very important when we meet people for them to understand very clearly what we're about. Because if I'm a dishonest person and you're an honest person, you've got to understand at some point, I'm going to try to see exactly how honest you are because I'm trying to attach to you dishonestly.
So give me an example. Can you give me an example? Can you give me like a, I don't know. Yeah. A kind of real-ish life example
So
of that.
let's say we're working together.
Mm-hmm.
And we're both accountants. And I go, you really don't have to claim that. You can put that in here. And actually, that could go into your bonus. And you hopefully, if you have a really clear circle, you go, oh, I didn't realize that. That would not be something I would be comfortable with. In therapy, I have people that will ask me to, I don't know, see someone under their insurance when that person is not insured. And so they'll say, oh, can you see my son? He doesn't have insurance, but I'm hoping you could bill it under mine. And I go, oh, I'm really sorry that he's not doing well. Unfortunately, that wouldn't be something I would be able to do. The key for that is not to panic. Because if I start to over-explain, that person's going to realize that my circle is not very well defined.
Okay.
So you don't want to just and say, I can't do that. I'm licensed. And then they go, well, why can't you do that? And now I'm starting to squirm. So they're looking for a little gap in the circle to see if they can get in. People pleasers really struggle with their circles because they'll get so much anxiety that they just do it. They do things that they don't want to do, or they allow people to, they get bitter and resentful because they get manipulated. But the truth of the matter is they don't clearly define what they will do and what they won't do because they feel guilty.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't help tell you how many, I feel so bad. I feel so bad. I feel so bad. Yeah.
No one else was offering, so I felt like I had to do it. And I was like, well, did you want to stay late? No, but I don't want the practice to, suffer. And so, I mean, they really sort of come up with these stories that are like, I don't think the practice is going to fold because you didn't stay a half an hour. But we tell ourselves these stories that sort of, and then we feel guilty and anxious. And then we do things that are sort of going against what we feel we should do or should not do.
And then that creates some of this kind of uncomfortable energy, right, in the body. That creates this like disconnect, I guess, because we're doing the opposite of what our values are.
True. We're not honoring ourselves.
Okay. All right. So back to this circle, right? So getting really clear in your values, expressing those values with less, so language wise, less is more, right? You kind of, you've got a couple of short sentences and that's it. You don't need to be explaining or apologizing or,
No, because the more that you explain, the more that you're really not exactly, your circle's not well defined. So if I'm taking off on a Friday morning and I say to you, I really have to get to the gym and I haven't, and then you go, well, this deadline's important. And then I go, okay, I'll skip the gym and I can stay. And that's just not okay. It's really not honoring you because I'm allowing you to manipulate me. And I'm not honoring myself because now I'm doing something that I really need that time to get to the gym. It's important for my mental health, my physical health. And I don't need to justify why I need a couple hours off.
Yes. Amen. Yes.
People over-explain too much.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely, So that's the circle, right? So you're developing this kind of circle. It's connected to the solar plexus. So it's really getting clear. And then what?
Well, basically for me, it sort of models I would say my integrity, what I know to be true about me. So obviously if you're out doing podcasts and so forth, you do have the occasional person who will give you some criticism or go on a Google review and so forth. And that bothers me less and less because I'm very clear, like with books that I write, you have this also. You write them with the intention of helping people.
Mm-hmm.
Whether they throw them in the garbage and think it's the worst read they've ever read or not, it doesn't really affect me, and I will still keep writing.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm very clear with not only who I am, but what my intentions are with writing it.
Got it. Yeah. And when you're clear on your intentions, I call it kind of setting your compass, right? When you really set your compass, and that for me is also energy, right? When you set your energy, then you can really take some knocks, right? And you're still okay. You're still okay. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
also affects the grounding chakra, just to be at peace. And so when I get feedback or I get people that give me their opinion and so forth, I hear it. And I'm not saying that I'm not going to listen. I understand it. If it's helpful, certainly I'm happy to have it. If it's just done for the sake of trying to put me down and so forth, I understand that that's also where they are vibrationally, and I can attach to that or not. That doesn't mean that I'm not open to, constructive criticism.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Okay. All right. And then how do we start to kind of, if we feel like we're stuck or we're blocked, or how do we begin to clear? How can we begin to clear some of the energy if we're struggling a little bit in some of these areas, like the solar plexus, right? If we're really struggling with getting clear about boundaries and we're a little iffy on our compass, how can we begin to kind of clear that and strengthen that?
One of the things I don't want to say this just because I am a therapist. It's really important to go, if you don't have a therapist, to have somebody that can at one time or another give you an objective opinion. Obviously, when we're struggling or we know that we're blocked or we know that we're struggling with a past hurt, if we knew what to do, we would have corrected it by now, but we don't. We're struggling with it. It's important to find someone to help you that can look at it a little bit more objectively. There are things that I will point out in session and they'll go, I never thought about it that way. I'm just giving a little bit of I'm looking at it through a different lens because I'm not in the experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
There are other things that we can do, such as meditation. If we're religious, our prayer time. There's also some other practices that we can do to help that. But there are times where no matter what we do, we're still somewhat stuck.
So this talking, right? The talk therapy can help kind of through the words and maybe the tears and maybe the expression of the anger or whatever, right? That can help kind of release some of this energy from these chakras from the body. Is that kind of what you're alluding to?
Well, what I'm doing when people come in is mental health is a science. So like somebody's going in for a physical exam, I'm doing a mental exam and I'm understanding where they are, where's the nervous system? Is it out of balance? Where is it? What are they going to for ease? Usually they have a not so great coping mechanism. What exactly is the problem and how can I start to introduce some ways of helping them get through the problem? It's almost like whatever they've experienced is stuck in the body. Over time, that looks like depression. It's a lot of stuck, old stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, old stuff, stuck stuff, and that can span decades, right? And we're not really looking at 6 months ago or a year ago. We're looking at, it can be decades.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And people get very committed to their frequency. And you know this by working with people with anxiety. It's like, my biggest fear is, and you go, well, that might not be a fear, that could be a concern. And they go, I know, and I'm worried about, although it's uncomfortable, it's very familiar.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, for me, it's that energy attracting the energy, right? It's kind of this self-fulfilling, right? It's just this hamster wheel of, yeah. I do want to validate that it is difficult to get out when you've been in that pattern or that energy for a long, long time. It is difficult to switch gears.
It is. And many times it's learned. Many times it's been modeled. And so it's hard to sort of unlearn something. And so this is where sometimes counseling and other forms of healing can be very helpful, because slowly we have to let go of the fear because it's really not serving us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, certainly we all struggle with anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
At some point. I mean, we all struggle with depression. We all struggle with things that trigger us. I mean, we're human beings. Of course, we're going to struggle with that. Doesn't mean that there's something wrong with us. It means that the body is alerting us that this needs a little bit of attention and some focus.
Mm-hmm. And some TLC. I mean, honestly, again, a therapist hat on, it doesn't take too much to sit and kind of give space and just hold that emotion, right? Just kind of just hold that fear for a moment. Let's just take a look at that. Let's just take a few breaths and see if we can kind of open it up a little bit in the body, kind of connect with it. And that in itself can be really powerful, you know, just to kind of lean in and open it up and just kind of connect with it for a moment or two.
Yes. Yes. I try not to be afraid of it. I try to find the meaning behind it. Like, why am I so anxious today? Or why am I feeling so frustrated? Because there's something that I'm not aware of, that now this is a symptom. And so it's not quite as scary if I sort of am noticing it and then saying, okay, so what do I need to do to shift this? Or what, maybe I'm not sleeping well, or maybe I'm working too much, and so forth. It just needs a little attention.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, reading the body and just noticing all these things as just a symptom, right? It's just like a little knock on the door. Knock, knock, knock. Hey, pay attention. Take a look here. Yeah.
It's uncomfortable. It's not harmful. It can be if it goes on and we don't address it, like a lot of medical things that we don't pay attention to until we have something very urgent. But you know, it's just a warning sign. It's just like, hey, I want you to see this. I'm not doing well. You go, oh, okay. What do you need?
Yeah. Yeah, we need more of that for sure.
Do
some practical kind of tips and strategies for listeners. What would you recommend? What are your kind of some things you might suggest if people are stuck or blocked or struggling? Or
I will tell you, my number one sort of tip is be careful with devices. As a society, we are just way overstimulated. And this is one of the things that the body will go to for ease. When the body is really sort of worn out and the mind is very active, we grab our social media and we think we're relaxing. What we're not realizing, it's very hard on the mind. The mind is still processing. We're not getting a break. Children now are getting I see a lot of tics. I'm actually starting to see a few seizures, which is very concerning. A lot of anger, a lot of emotional, in kids, it's not uncommon, but as we get older, a lot of emotional instability. We're just overstimulated. We're certainly not as present as we should be.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that I do in my personal life to sort of be careful and be mindful of it. I understand we connect and we learn, and there's wonderful things about all of these, but like with food or anything else, there's balance.
Yeah. So what are a couple of personal things that you do with regard to the social media and the phone and the screen time? What are some of the boundaries?
Every week I get a notification with my average screen time. And if I keep myself, I have a parameter. And if it's above that, I mindfully will take some time from it. I'm also, obviously, I do all my charting on my computer. And then after that, when I'm all finished, I shut it. Like at nighttime, I'm just not available. I just don't want, as you know, it's like a slippery slope. And so I understand that I enjoy it, but I don't want to enjoy it to the point where I'm not enjoying what's in front of me.
Yeah.
I believe that's where God is, like right in the moment. So I don't want to miss anything. Good.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And that feels, when you said that, it feels just so grounded right now. We're kind of connected with that, maybe that root chakra and then the crown chakra, and just feels so just kind of grounded and present and peaceful. That's a lovely energy. Yeah. Wow, Denise, thank you. Is there anything else you want to add or share before I ask you the sage advice question?
Well, if I would love for people to visit my website. I have had 3 books. I have one coming out. If the listeners would like to email me, I'd be happy to send them a copy.
So tell us about the book coming out.
It's called Elephants Don't Marry Giraffes.
Okay.
It's a relationship book. It's really important to have a healthy relationship when we ourselves are not healthy.
Mm,
And so I took a lot of problems. I do a lot of couples counseling and family counseling. I took a lot of common problems that I see and how they involve, and I almost quilted them and made up stories to sort of present of clients coming in and what their problems are, what I would notice in session and things I would point out with some practical advice toward the end.
sounds amazing. I'm so curious. I'll definitely put a link to that in the show notes.
Yeah, should be out in a couple of weeks. There was a couple of mistakes, as you know, writing, you go back and forth until the last possible second. There were a couple of mistakes that had to be corrected, and then it's ready to print.
Okay, fantastic. So thank you. All right. So the last question, right? If you had a piece of sage advice about living intentionally, what would that be?
Realize that the way God or the universe communicates to us, however you want to envision that, it has to be uncomfortable or we would never notice it. So it has to come in a little bit painfully or a little suffering, not that God or the universe is trying to harm us, but they're trying to get our attention for whatever reason. We need to grow, we need to evolve, we need to see something very important. We have free will. So if we say, I don't want to see it, I don't want to deal with it, I'm going to ignore it, that's fine, but the energy is just going to circle around and come around a little harder. And so we can choose to ignore and not address, or we can recognize it and realize that we need to make some sort of a shift. The mind doesn't need to get involved. Of course, the mind goes, oh, I don't know. I feel guilty. I don't. No, just feel it. Understand there is meaning in it. There's something to learn. Even tragedy, we can learn some wonderful gifts through tragedy. We certainly learn compassion. We learn connection with tragedy. So try not to fear it. Try to understand that there's a reason it's coming in your life. And when I say, why me? I always say, well, why not you? Because I sometimes I feel like I shouldn't have to suffer, but it's important that I go through my own suffering too, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Thank you so much. Where can people find you, Denise, if they want to connect?
Yes, my website, which is my name, DeniseSchonwald.com. I'd be happy to. So appointments are available. I'm licensed nationally as well as in the state of Florida, where I live. So I see people all over the country. My books, I'm happy that I've been sending them. One made it as far as the Philippines.
Oh,
so my books are my ministry. They're of course on Amazon, but I mail them out all the time because my purpose and my intention is for healing.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's where we can connect on that too. I think that resonate with that for sure. So thank you for your time today. It's been a pleasure. I've learned so much, and I know this conversation is going to be helpful for the listeners out there too. And I would encourage everybody, jump on, grab one of her books, and reach out if you have any questions.
That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care. Thanks so much for listening. I truly appreciate you and your time. I love to hear from listeners, so connect with me at katechampionauthor.com. Remember to grab your free hiking guide, and please take a quick moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the show. Thanks so much. Take care. Until next time. Hey, me again. Just a reminder, this podcast should not be considered professional advice. It's also not a substitute for mental, physical, or any other healthcare-related treatment. For any questions about your condition and or concerns, please contact a fully licensed healthcare professional. Thank you.